shtus. Ein adam ever avera, a person doesn't do something against the will of a Kadosh Baruch Elohim Kain unless nichnas bey, it enters into him ruach shtus, a spirit of folly. What's that? He doesn't feel that by virtue of this action he's separating himself from a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and that's the reason he'll do it, because a Jew does not want to be separate from a Kadosh Baruch Hu. We discussed that last week. A Jew in a state of health doesn't want and can't separate himself from the Eibishter. So why is it that a Jew might do an Aveira? And again, obviously the Rebbe is talking about something that we would refer to as a practicing Jew. That person who went through the survey that we did last week, he believes in the fact that the Eibishter created the world and gave us the Torah and split the sea and did 10 Makkos, and Moshe Rabbeinu's Moshe Rabbeinu and Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, they're real. He believes all of that. And he believes all of that is expressed properly in Shulchan Aruch. And so what's written in Shulchan Aruch is indeed what it is that should guide our behavior. And yet, despite the fact that he might vote in that box in every question in that survey, he still might do something against the will of the Eibishter. Why? At that moment, he doesn't realize that he's separating himself from the Eibishter. Why not? So what we learned yesterday was, since I might not be sensitive to the beauty and the godliness of a mitzvah, so then I might not be so sensitive to distancing myself from something so beautiful. And we had just started discussing the Rebbe's discussion of the Nefesh Elokis. Well, I was ultimately going to get to the Nefesh Abamis, but first the Nefesh Elokis. But the Nefesh Elokis, so where are we? I'm counting up from the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 lines up is where we got to, right? That the 11, 12, let's say more, right? That the Nefesh Elokis runs away from anything that isn't obviously godly, like someone running away from something which could injure them, like running away from death, chas v'sholom. The bader loy, so I think I'm 10 or 11, 12 lines up. The bader loy la nefesh elokis. It's absolutely clear to the godly soul. The misa ruchnis, it's spiritual death. Rachmana litzlan, heaven forfend, who kasha yeser is worse, mi misa gashmis, chas v'shalom, than physical death. Physical death is simply the transition from one state to another state. A person was down here in Eilam Hazeh, his neshama was clothed in his body in Eilam Hazeh, and he was doing whatever it is that he does down here. And if that person unfortunately leaves this world, so nothing happens to his soul, his body is put in the ground, and the soul goes to a place that is much more beautiful than this place. Right? Not that he can accomplish up there what he could have accomplished down here. This is the place where we can do what really has to get done. That being said, that place is an amazing place, about which Chazal say, and we've talked about it, one moment of Elam Haba is greater than, or one moment of pleasure in Elam Hazeh is greater than all the pleasure that could possibly be experienced in the 6,000 years of the world's history. Right? That doesn't mean the pleasure that a particular person can get, the pleasure that can be experienced in this world. Intellectual, physical, emotional, spiritual pleasure that a person and all people could experience in this world. One moment in Elam Haba, one moment in Gan Eden is greater than that. Okay, so that's rather pleasant. The ikr is to be here, there's no question, but the passage from here to there is simply passing from one state to another state, and in no way, shape, or form is the person die. That's why we don't say about a yid, death. Talk about passing. Right? Passing from one place to another place. A dog dies. Why? Well, he doesn't go anywhere. It's just the end. He did his, 12 years, which is what every doggy year is 7 years or something. He did his 12 human years, which is 85 doggy years. And he made someone very happy, probably some 15-year-old kid who, just happy to get a welcome and a slobbery kiss every time he came home. Okay, fine. And then he goes away, he disappears, there's no more dog. So what happens to us? There's a neshama, and that neshama goes to a different place. So obviously spiritual death, when the neshama, chas v'sholem, dies, meaning the neshama is cut off from its source and no longer exists, that's rather serious. Physical passing, As I mentioned to you before, the Rebbe wrote to my roommate in yeshiva who lost his father. The Rebbe wrote the family a letter. The passing of a loved one is only difficult for those left behind. For the loved one, it's a very beautiful experience. Okay. So certainly the Nefesh Elokis realizes that physical death is worse than spiritual death. V'kol chukosei, and all of its longing, v'cheftzei, and desire. What does the Nefesh Elokis want? Elokus. The godly soul is naturally interested in Elokus, the same way the animal soul is naturally interested in chocolate pudding. It doesn't take a voiduf to get the Nefesh of Bahamis into chocolate pudding. That's just its nature. It likes chocolate pudding, or maybe vanilla, right? If there's something wrong. Okay, so a person likes chocolate. You don't have to convince a person. Oh, here, do some of it. Read up on chocolate. You'll come to like it. That doesn't have to do that. You want to love the Eibishter? You have to read up on the Eibishter if you want to love the Eibishter. Okay, why? Because the Nefesh Bahamis isn't naturally inclined for that, though it can be a kli for that. It can be a vessel for that. What does the Nefesh Elokis want to be? Close to the Eibishter. The Lasos Kelim Lelokus, and to make vessels for the revelation of Elokus down here in this world. That's the Nefesh Elokis. Now the Rebbe switches to the Nefesh Bahamis. V'kol gasus, all the crassness, the chumris and the physicality, yeshus, the focus on self and metzias and the existence of the Nefesh Bahamis. What's the nature of the Nefesh Bahamis? Again, it doesn't have to be this way. We learned this in the second chapter. It can be elevated by the hislavshus of the Nefesh Elokis and the Nefesh Bahamis, in clothing the Nefesh Elokis and the Nefesh Bahamis, contemplating godliness in a way that the Nefesh Bahamis can understand. So the Nefesh Bahamis makes a decision to get up in the morning and come to a Chassidus class. It's Nefesh Bahamis who made that decision, because conscious me made the decision, and the Nefesh Bahamis is conscious me. Okay, but what's its nature if it's not educated and illuminated? What's it interested in? How do machasu master mailim? It three different words of concealment: covers, hides, and conceals. Ala hergish the Nefesh Elokis. And the Rebbe used that word constantly in this chapter. Hergish, sensitivity. Have to develop sensitivity to godliness. Right? There's some people who work on being sensitive to wine. They can tell you the difference between a Merlot and a Cabernet Sauvignon, what year it is and what country it's from. That they work. They weren't born that way. They worked very, very hard on developing this sensitivity to wine. They can tell you, oh, this is a and this is a okay, you're fit. Now, what if I took that energy and worked on trying to become sensitive to God? That would be interesting. It's going to take work. Same way that guy who's sensitive to wine, it took work. He worked at it, and for whatever reason, he worked at it. He enjoys it. He lives amongst people who like wine, and he wants to be accepted. Whatever, it could be the highest reason, the lowest reason, it could be whatever it is. But for some reason, this guy decided he wanted to be an expert in wine. He might just like wine. I don't know. Some people like wine. Some people don't like wine. Okay. If you don't like wine, I don't know whether it's such a big deal. You have to work on yourself to like wine. Right? Most people don't like whiskey. Give whiskey to a 13-year-old and see what they say. Or a 6-year-old and see what they say. Terrible taste. Right, agreed. Terrible taste. Okay, but if you want to be cool, you might have to like a single malt, because if you don't like single malt, then you can't explain the difference between a Singleton and a Glenmorangie, so then there's something wrong with you. Oh, so you have to develop a taste for it. But naturally, no one would like the taste. It tastes like gasoline. Right? Chocolate pudding, naturally, people do like that taste. There's acquired tastes. Okay, so a person has to work on becoming sensitive to what's unique about that taste, so we can become sensitive to what's unique about the taste of Elokus. Tamuruki Tevavai, we say it every Shabbos. Right? Taste and see that God is good, David Melech says. We have to taste it, though. Because what does the Nefesh Bahamis do? It hides the sensitivity of the Nefesh Elokis. The Nefesh Elokis is sensitive to godliness. The Nefesh Bahamis, not so much. Ube pshitus, simply. Rabbi says, what does this all mean? As der Geschmack von Welt, a person's pleasure in worldly matters, oilam shu helem, the word world in Hebrew comes from the same root as the word concealment, is mechasu master, covers and conceals uftem hergish eloki, a person's sensitivity to godliness. Right? The Rebbe is talking about it in spiritual terms. You can talk about it also in personal terms, emotional terms. A person who's very, very, very wrapped up in themselves, they're insensitive to other people, right? It's just the way they are, because they're so busy being sensitive to themselves and in tune with themselves that they're not in tune with anybody else, because they're just hearing their own noise so much. And that's just on a personal level. So also on a godly level, same thing. To the extent that I'm very, very in tune with myself, and I can, tell you exactly how many granules of sugar I ate, and so I'm having a sugar rush and a blah, 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 and whatever. The person can tell you everything about themselves to the smallest detail. To that extent, those people tend to be insensitive to other people. They talk a good game about other people, but they're generally insensitive to them. Why? Well, they're just so wrapped up in themselves, they don't have room for anybody else. Okay, so that can happen relative to other people. That can also obviously happen relative to Kadosh Baruch Hu. To godliness. This is the opposite of the intention of the creation of the world. That which was the supernal intention, in the creation of the worlds. What did the Kadosh Baruch Hu want? We've seen this already in the Maamer, and it's certainly something that you've heard many, many times. The nisava, interesting language that Chazal use. It's a direct quote from the Medrash and Medrash Tanchuma, Parshas Nasai. The nisava, the Eibush had a taiva, in other words, a desire that can't be explained rationally. The nisava Kadosh Baruch Hu liyos lo yizbarach, that there should be for him a dir b'tachtonim, a dwelling place in the lower realms. But, and the Rebbe is going to add 3 very, very important words next. That dwelling place in the lower realms that's not really the desire. Yes, if Kadosh Baruch Hu wants a dwelling place in the lower realms, but if a Kadosh Baruch Hu wants to be revealed in this world, he can reveal himself in this world. He can do anything. He's beyond limitation. But he doesn't want to be revealed in this world. He wants to be revealed in this world, and then the next words, Al Yedei Avedus Ha'adam, by virtue of what you and I do down here. He wants us to reveal. And specifically, where does that happen? Beguf v'nefesh habahamis, in a body with an animal soul. So we can't complain we have an animal soul. First of all, the animal soul gives us that incredible experience of existence. Why are we aware of our own existence? Because we have an animal soul, and that's an amazing experience. We might take it for granted, but existing is quite cool. Right? I mean, none of us have ever experienced the alternative, but existence is pretty interesting. That's why in the morning, if we pay attention to what we're saying, we thank God for another day of existence every morning. That's the first words that come out of our mouth. Meidan. I just saw a very interesting interview with a shaliach, who, and the Rebbe was talking a lot about Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, the 7 Noachide laws for all of mankind. So, actually the Rebbe is also talking about it in the context of the Rega Shel Shtika, that should be a moment of silence in all schools in North America. Well, in the world, B'chlal, but the Rebbe is talking mostly about America, but the Canadians also heard it. So, that was something the Rebbe talked about a lot. It's interesting, the Rebbe started talking about it. 2 things happened. I don't remember what the second one was. One was someone tried to assassinate Ronald Reagan. And then something else also happened, which showed that there was a certain lack of sensitivity to the holiness of another human being. So Rebbe thought it might be important to educate children in America that there's something called God, and they should have a certain appreciation of existence and life and the Creator and the created. So Rebbe talked a lot about the moment of silence. So the shluchim in Toronto arranged a meeting. Now, b'chlal, the shluchim were talking to heads of school boards, etc., and trying to get this to happen. And certain school boards were very into it, and others obviously were not. They went to visit they made a meeting with the Prime Minister of Canada. And they wrote the Rebbe that they were meeting with the Prime Minister of Canada, and they had bought him a big Kiddush cup, big silver Kiddush cup with a nice engraving. And they wrote the Rebbe the night before the meeting. They wrote the Rebbe the day before the meeting that they're going in tomorrow morning, and they asked for success in the meeting, etc., etc. That night, Rabbi Groner called up the shaliach in Toronto, Zalmanar and Grossbaum, called him up and said, did you write the Rebbe this morning about going to visit the Prime Minister? Yes. And did you mention that you're going to give the Prime Minister a Kiddush cup? Yes. The Rebbe asks, what for? What's he going to do with a Kiddush cup? I mean, the one is big, huge, silver. I mean, he's not. If you gave him a normal one, he also wouldn't have anything to do with it. Okay. So then the Rebbe said, why don't you give him a siddur with English translation, which is relevant to him, because even non-Jews can definitely say leGani every morning when they get up. So here they are, it's 11 o'clock at night in Toronto. They have a meeting at 9 in the morning, probably, this time they might be were they in Ottawa yet? I mean, it's an hour, half an hour on the plane. So probably not, maybe an hour. Right, so were they there? I'm not sure where he was. He might have been in Ottawa already, he might have still been in Toronto. But they got this message from the Rebbe at night, 10 o'clock at night, that the next morning when they go visit the Prime Minister, they should give him a siddur. So they had to find, and the Rebbe said the siddur should be in a box. So somehow they had to find a leather-bound siddur, have it engraved, and get it in a box by the next morning when they went to visit the Prime Minister. And what was, someone sent me the video of him talking, and at the end of the video, there's a picture of them handing this leather. So they did it. They found the siddur, and they engraved the leather siddur. That was the Rebbe's message to them, that a non-Jew can also say leGani. Okay, I'll say it in English. Everybody should wake up in the morning and say, thank you, Abishah, for giving me existence. And the awareness and experience of that existence is called the Nefesh Bahamis. Because what am I aware of? My existence. Can that part of me become aware of God's existence? Yes, of course. That's what we're doing right now. Trying to sensitize our Nefesh Bahamis to God's existence. That's why we do what we do. We don't have to learn physics in the morning. We're very, very clearly, we understand very, very clearly that when we put the cup down, it'll stay on the table. We have to understand something that might be more metaphysical in the morning to sensitize ourselves to godliness. So when we go to talk to him in another half an hour, 40 minutes, we'll actually have an appreciation of the fact that there's someone to talk to. But the Nefesh Bahamis covers up the sensitivity of Nefesh Elokish. This is the opposite of what God wants. Because what did he want? Why did he send us down here? He sent us down here because he wants to deal with Tachtoinim. How? Al Yedei Avedus Adam, 5 lines up, a goof and Nefesh Bahamis. Eliyas Ba'elam Zed Dafka, to be in this world. Don't complain about the world. This is the world God wants you in. And don't complain about your Nefesh Bahamis. He wants you to have one. He gave it to you. Oh, if I didn't have a Nefesh Bahamis, I could serve God. No, if you didn't have a Nefesh Bahamis, you couldn't serve God. The only reason you can serve God, the way you can serve God, is because you have a Nefesh Bahamis. Angels don't serve as well as we do, because they're serving God. It's very nice, it's amazing, it's incredible, but there's nothing to it, because there's no possible alternative. What makes our service of God so incredible and so amazing is that it's possible not to. So when we do, it's real. Where does that come from? Nefesh Bahamis. Right? Well, if only Gullus would disappear, I could work on bringing Mashiach. That's a pretty ridiculous thing to say. Where do you bring Mashiach from? Gullus, right? Obviously, Gullus is the fertile ground for bringing Mashiach. If I needed Geula in order to bring Mashiach, so then that's all right. It's sort of putting the cart before the horse. Right? The fertile ground for bringing Mashiach is the Gullus that we're in. Is it difficult and challenging? Yeah, it might be. Right? It certainly could be, and it's especially challenging because I have this thing called the Nefesh Bahamis. Yes, you're going to blame your Nefesh Bahamis for all the things that go wrong. Well, that's a ridiculous position to take. The Abishah gave you the Nefesh Bahamis, and every single one of us has the ability to deal with our Nefesh Bahamis in such a way that it can be used, elevated, and illuminated, and used to bring about a revelation of God. And Elamazah, that's what it's here for. Naturally it might fight that. Okay, well, we can train it, elevate it, right? So what are we here for? What's our Nefesh Elokis in this world for? Liyos ba'elam zeh, dafka, to be in this world specifically, levarei, to rectify it, and lezachar, and to purify it. What might happen, the Rebbe says? Ubefeil ba'ala hefechas v'shom, the opposite might happen. I told you, this chapter is where the Rebbe puts his hands in our kishkas and pulls them out. It's a very heavy chapter. There's or in chapter 2, and there's lots of or in chapter 4. Chapter 3, the Rebbe explains the opposite. What can happen? What can happen? The opposite. Chas v'sholem sha'olam. What can we allow to happen? And it's a real challenge not to allow this to happen. Sha'olam mastir etzlei, that the world hides by this person, al ora emes, the light of truth. Now, ultimately, we have to say that we allow the world to do that, because the possibility exists that we don't allow the world to do that. So then if we do allow, right? I mean, if the possibility exists that it doesn't have to be this way, so then that means that I've allowed the world to do that to me. That doesn't mean it's not an incredible challenge to overcome that. It is. It's a real challenge. Not easy at all. But ultimately, it's still something that I allow in my life. Someone once came to the Maggid Mizvich and claimed he had strange thoughts when he davens. He said, they're not strange, they're yours. The word in Hebrew is machshavas zares, foreign thoughts. He said, they're not foreign, they're yours. I understand. That's what you think about all day. So when you daven, that's what you think about. I understand. Why are you surprised? Who lets those in? They're planted in there by someone else? They say that there might be some external reality that's trying to get you to think that way, but I don't have to think that way. Right? Another person came to the Maggid with the same issue. The Maggid sent him to Zhitomer. Remember Zhitomer? He sent him to Zhitomer. Zev Wolf of Zhitomer. That's where he sent him to go. And we heard a story in Gemara class yesterday about Zhitomer. So he went to Zhitomer to see Zev Wolf Kitzis. So Zev Wolf Kitzis was a Chassid of the Baal Shem Tov, Chassid of the Maggid. And he got there at night, late in the day, knocked on the door, no answer. Knocked on the door, no answer. Finally, after a while, standing out in the cold, Zev Wolf opened the door, didn't say hello, just said, I'll take you to your room. So he took him to his room and said, here's your room. Do you want me to knock on the door so you'll wake up and come with me to mikveh and chakras? He said, yes, okay. I'll see you in the morning. That was that. And he treated him that way for a week. Finally, after a week, he told Zev Wolf, I'm going home. He said, why are you going home? He said, well, I came here to learn something, but I didn't learn anything. He said, no, you learned exactly what you came here to learn. He said, what do you mean? You didn't even talk to me. You barely said hello. If you gave me food and you gave me a place to stay, and I appreciate that, and I'm saying thank you for that, but I mean, you didn't teach me anything. But I taught you exactly what you came here to learn. So what's that? He said, I taught you that if it's your house, you let in whoever you want. Is this your house? So you let in whatever you want. What do we put in there? Whatever we want, right? And we can put anything we want in there. Right? We can be experts in batting averages of the Pittsburgh Pirates. There's got to be one person in the world who's an expert in the batting averages of the Pittsburgh Pirates, right? Or experts in the difference between Atik and Arech. What do we want in there? Whatever we put. So it can be that the Nefesh Elokis hides the light of truth. And it can be, the Rebbe says, and again, this Friedrich Rebbe getting very graphic. V'nishave v'nisgashem. Nishave means he becomes thick. V'nisgashem, and becomes so materialistic. Kol kach ad shenechsar etzloi, until it's lacking from kol chush, any feeling, mehr hergish, from sensitivity, anikra feeling. Binyanim ruchnim, in spiritual matters. A person can become completely insensitive to godliness, to ruchnius. Shezeba, and where does this come from? Basibas and Nefesh Habahamis. There's no question that this comes from the Nefesh Habahamis. Why? Because what's the nature of the Nefesh Habahamis? As we said, Shu Kavua, that it's rooted, umushrash, set and rooted, mushrash. Binyani Oidam, in matters of the world. Now again, it doesn't have to stay that way. We learned that in the second chapter, but that's its nature. V'zeu kol mahusa v'inyanim, that's what it's all about. Ubehem, and in those matters, worldly matters, what can happen? The Nefesh Habahamis says, yege, he contemplates, v'yachshav, and thinks, v'yadaber, and he'll speak about b'chayis, behergish, with a tremendous amount of vitality and sensitivity. He's into it. With a groise geschmack, he'll talk about physical things with a great geschmack. Talk about the leather seats in his car, and it's just like, wow, they're so comfortable, they're so amazing, and the dashboard, and you can get it, okay. Everybody should have a car with a nice dashboard and leather seats. There's no reason why not, but I don't have to put my head there. It's just nice to have, and it's good, and hopefully you can figure out how to get your ways on the screen so you can, the car will tell you where to go. Asher hergish zeh, this sensitivity, b'chlaluse, next page, Ubefrat, in particular, in hanoyam, their geschmack, the pleasure, sheyesh le bezeh. Rebbe says something very heavy. It negates his sensitivity and ruchnius. We talked about it yesterday. You can't be in two places at once. Again, that does not mean that a person doesn't go make a living and a person shouldn't make a very good living and have everything they need in Gashmias plus. And they should have so much in Gashmias that they're giving away all sorts of stock to other people and to amaze this. They're doing amazing stuff with their Gashmias. Okay, but say 100%. The question is, well, but what are they really worried about? What's going on in their head? When they're at work, what are they worried about? There's two options. When they're sitting with their children, they can be thinking about work, or when they're sitting at work, they can be thinking about their children. I hope that we're the latter, not the former. So that if we're sitting with our children and the phone rings and it has to be something to do with work, which might be running a business, so we don't answer. Why? Because I'm doing what I'm really here for. I'm here to be with my children, to make sure my children are elachiyidin and people who appreciate godliness and people who daven and learn. Is that right? Okay, so does that mean I don't go to work? Of course I got to work. It's got to work. You know, God created the world that way. It's a big pain in the neck, but He did. We're not all born with unlimited bank accounts where we can just write a check, take care of what we need, and spend our time doing other things that might be more noble pursuits. No, it's not the way the world works. Okay, but we have the ability to allow our nefesh habayis to be sensitive to elokus, or the opposite thereof. But it's all a matter of my choices in life. The ikar, where does this all come from? The Rebbe says, because the natural coldness of the nefesh habayis. Now the Rebbe, he just talks about the nefesh habayis in the most, it's like unbelievable. It's heavy, but okay, we'll blast through it, so we won't roll up into little balls. Right? Because he's describing us the way we can be. It doesn't mean this is the way we have to be. That's what's so beautiful about all this, is we have the possibility of not being like this. But we also have the possibility of being like this, and at least we should appreciate what it means. The etzem koldkeit, the essential coldness, shaloi, and in yonim ruchnim, the nefesh habayis, again, naturally, not if we educate it. The nefesh habayis can get very excited about elokus. The Rebbe told us that in chapter 2. And as a matter of fact, it gets more excited about elokus than the nefesh elokis, because the nefesh habayis tends to be very, very passionate. And so if I can get it passionate about elokus, it's on fire. But it can also be passionate about, I don't know, whatever, the latest, whatever that just came out, whatever it is, I don't know. The latest drapes in the upholstery store. The Shmei, that what his name, teaches us what he's about, Nefesh Habahami. Kol chayusei v'argashosei, all of his vitality and his sensitivity. Again, this is naturally, without education. Hu rag b'inyonim ba'amim. It's only in animalistic things. Kamei shana roim b'muchash. Now, the Rebbe is very, very heavy here. Look what he says. He's the Friedrich Rebbe. Kamei shana roim b'muchash, as we see. Muchash means we see actually, with our eyes in physicality. Diyesha noshim, there are people. That's really interesting. The Rebbe is about to describe his description of the most crass person imaginable. So he's not going to be talking about someone who drinks beer and burps all day, which is sort of what we might, imagine that person to look like. And he's doing that at a football game with no shirt on in November in Cleveland. Right, so it's like he doesn't even feel it. It's minus 4,000 degrees, and he's pouring his beer down. Right? Okay, that's not the guy the Rebbe is talking about. Who's he talking about? There are people. In addition to the fact they're empty of wisdom, Torah, and midas yesharis, and proper emotional traits. Their deeds are animalistic deeds mamish. And what is that? The Rebbe says something fascinating. They trample and ridicule, heaven forfend, minyanim aruchnim, about spiritual things. asher ein lem shum musag klal, about which they have no comprehension whatsoever. Someone might tell you, and this might be someone, and it's not this person's fault, they're not a bad person, it's just circumstance led them to this place where they wouldn't be able to find a Rashi below the Chumash, because they wouldn't know what a Chumash looks like. They certainly couldn't tell you which is Rashi and which is Tosfos on a page of Gemara. And they certainly couldn't read anything in the middle. And if you talk to them about Shulchan Aruch, they wouldn't know what you're talking about. And if you mention certain less famous stories of the Torah, they probably have never heard it. They probably heard of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, though I did once have a birthright group here in Mayanot, one of our Taste of Jewish Learnings. This was about 20 years ago. Had a birthright group, and I was learning something with them, and I had to give them a little background of what we were learning. We were learning about the reunion of Yaakov and Yosef in Egypt and the reunion of Yosef with his brothers in Egypt, right? So you need a little background of the story, right? So I asked them, anybody know the story? No. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, anybody know? 25 American graduate students. Not one of them knew who Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob was. Now, that struck, I'm telling the story 20 years later because I was so shocked. I mean, how can you grow up in Western society and not ever heard of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? I mean, that's just part of Western society. But I guess it's just not on Netflix or whatever it is they were involved in at that point. There was no Netflix then. Right? I was like, whoa. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the mamas and the papas, like, you never heard of them? Nope. Okay. Now that was extreme. So the Rebbe is talking about someone who's a little less extreme than that, we imagine. But what's interesting about that person? They'll have a position on whether the Torah is from God or not. They'll tell you why Torah is old-fashioned and why your behavior is not reasonable. I understand. It's like us having a position on some new method of neurosurgery. Like, Danny, you want to tell me about, I just heard, what's your position on this? Position? I don't know anything about it. I have a position. I can have a position on this, right? But they have a position. There's two groups of people that everybody knows more about the subject that they're experts in. Everybody knows more about medicine than doctors, and everybody knows more about God than rabbis. My wife's a doctor. Right, what can you do? We put up with this, right? Doesn't everybody know more about medicine than doctors, right? Everybody else, right? Oh, the doctor misdiagnosed me. Oh, yeah, you're an expert in this diagnosis. Yeah, you did. You probably read an article on the internet and fell asleep in the middle. Right? Actually, you didn't fall asleep in the middle. Halfway through, you got bored and you clicked on the highlights of the ball game. Right? Not you. I'm saying the guy who's saying this. Okay, so, right. So the Rebbe says that's Nefesh Bahamis. That's the most crass expression of the Nefesh Bahamis. It's so amazing because it shows a complete and total lack of sensitivity of the beauty and the holiness of Torah and mitzvahs. So the person will trample on Torah and mitzvahs because they have no appreciation of what it really is. It's heavy. And again, it's not because the person's a bad person. They were put there. No one told them different. Lee. Different? Different Lee? Different. Whatever. Whichever one is right, so that's the one I said. Who walks and tramples without any distinction. Imu afar ve'etz, there's a cow. When a cow is walking in a bunch of cows are herding, stampeding through the forest. So what are they stepping on? Well, I don't care if it's dirt or a piece of wood or gufa adam or it's a human body. They don't care. Why? It's a cow. Shumip neheder herges. He has a lack sensitivity. So the bulls running in Spain will trample whatever's in their way. The behema rein lo das has no appreciation of reality. So too, there are people like the Shem Kebehema Mamish. V'lo yigim al Torah mitzvahs. They ridicule Torah and mitzvahs. Umehem, there are those shabeichrim lahem. They choose for them drochim sheinim, different paths. Mitzvah zuhem mekaimim this mitzvah. They do v'zeh eina reitzim l'kaimim this one. They don't want to fulfill without any appreciation of what a mitzvah really is. The one who created us knows what's best for us. Okay? So we don't eat dirt. Of course we don't eat dirt. You don't eat dirt, you eat fruit and vegetables and, eggs and meat and whatever you eat, right? If you're vegan, so you eat whatever you eat, right? You eat. Okay. Now who knows what's best for us to eat? I assume the one who created us knows what's best for us to eat. So you and I have a special diet. There's certain things that aren't unhealthy for other people that are unhealthy for us. There's certain things we're not allowed to eat. Why? It's not good for us. Why? I don't know. It's a metaphysical non-goodness. It's not a physical non-goodness. But okay, so you and I eating bacon is it's poison. Bacon is poison for your soul. Why is bacon poison for my soul? It's not poison for that guy. I don't know. That's just the way it is. You're different. So your diet has to be different. Okay? Who told me that? The one who created me. So he knows. So if I have any sensitivity to things like that, I'll listen. If I'm not sensitive, so I might even ridicule. So where does this come from, this lack of sensitivity to the beauty of Torah and mitzvahs? That doesn't mean that a person has to vote for it, but at least appreciate that it's something special. Speaking on college campuses, so in election years, can always say something to the students that's very interesting and they think about it. They really do think about it. It makes an impression. You can talk about it any year, but election year, it's more powerful. Ask them when they vote, what do? When you vote in the election, what do? You go to your parents, you say, Mommy, Daddy, am I a Democrat or a Republican? Who should I vote for? So you do? So of course they get all upset. No, of course not. What do? Well, they'll read a couple of articles. They might even watch a debate. They'll come to an intelligent decision themselves as an intelligent young person who's making their own decisions about things that matter in life, right? I mean, that's a reasonable thing. That's what you expect. You would hope everybody does. There's people who don't, but you would hope they do. Right? Okay. So about your Jewish heritage, how do you vote? Mommy, Daddy, are we unaffiliated, Reconstructionist, Reform, Conservative, or Orthodox? What are we? Whatever you tell me, that's what I do. Why should I vote on my Jewish heritage the way I would never vote in an American election? How should I vote? Vote from a position of strength. Learn something about it. What does that mean? I'm not talking to you. You already did it. But you can say this to some people you encounter in the future. Go to yeshiva for 3 weeks in the winter. Go to yeshiva for 5 weeks in the summer. At least you'll have some appreciation of what you're voting about. You can vote no. You're allowed to vote no. I mean, right? You are. The way God created the world, they're allowed to vote no. You're allowed to vote no. So, you know what? It's not for me. But at least there's some semblance of understanding of what it is I'm voting on. It's my Jewish heritage, for goodness sake. It's my birthright. Like, I don't know anything about it. Okay, so it'd be nice to know something about it. And at least the vote is an intelligent vote, an educated vote. And God created the world in such a way that a person is, saying the word allowed is like a funny word. You're allowed to say no. Now he says in the Torah, I'm going to smash you if you say no. Okay, say it, but you're allowed to say no, right? We know that. That's the way it works. God will let someone God will give energy and life and vitality to someone as he's sitting at a computer terminal with a keyboard writing a book about the fact that God does not exist. At that moment, God will give him the existence to write that book. I don't know about you. If I were God, the guy would get snuffed out right away if he started writing that about me. I don't see chutzpah. I don't exist. I'm giving him a poof. He's gone. Honey, come for dinner. There's no one left. Right? God's pretty chilled. Let's just do whatever we want. Whatever we want. He tells us what he wants us to do, but he lets us do anything. Okay. And we can get ourselves in crazy places. So this nefesh bahamis is like what's the behemoth? The behemoth, they're drinking beer and burping. Okay, beseder. Cows don't drink beer and burp. Right? They eat grass. I guess they burp. I'm not sure. Right? But that's not the behemoth the Rebbe's talking about. The behemoth the Rebbe's talking about is someone who's lacking any sensitivity to godliness. So he's like a behemoth, because when a behemoth walks, it doesn't have any. It has no appreciation of the difference between the piece of wood that he's walking over and the body of the person that he might be trampling. Why? You don't expect him to. He's a bull on the streets of Spain. Okay, so he's just, if you're in the way, it's not going to be good for you. The bull doesn't stop and say, "Hold up, fellows, there's a person here, just wait a minute, let him cross." The kol zeh ba, where does this come from? Azus v'akridus, the chutzpah, and the coolness of the nefesh bahamish. Asher zeh hu hasiba, this is the reason, v'hagorem, and the cause. Masha adam bali de aveda, Rahman Islam, why a person could do something against the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because we're overcome by this spirit of folly, this temporary insanity, that we lose sight of what we understand to be true. Shu ruach shtus, this is what we learned at the beginning of the chapter. Shu ruach shtus, the sitra achu. This is the spirit of folly of the other side, so to speak. For kisui the nefesh bahamis, and the covering up of the nefesh bahamis, sheheim ma'ilimu mumastirim, that this hides and conceals al ora emes, the light of truth, ad shenase hepech hakavan elyon, until a person can actually act in line with that which is exactly the opposite of the supernal desire and the intention as to why he was created. That what was God's intention? The kavan elyon, God's intention was shenivra olam, that the world was created, a very challenging place, a place where God is hidden. To rectify the world and make the world a vessel for the revelation of godliness, which is what you and I can do to Eilam Hazeh. But what can happen? If we allow the nefesh bahamis to cover up the truth, the opposite can happen. That the world loy die, not only she'enam misbader misdakech, not only is the world not rectified and purified, it becomes even more a vehicle for concealing and hiding the light of truth. And that's the ruach shtus that covers up the truth. Whoa. Ois Gimel, Basi L'Gani, Tafshin Yud, rather heavy. Let's see the kitzur, and then we'll go to Ois Dalet. I want to get you to Ois Dalet so you don't roll up into a little ball. Yavar, the ruach shtus takef atayva of nefesh bahamis bechlal. The ruach shtus is the power of the desires of the nefesh bahamis in general. Mechasim ala emes, hide truth. Right? I can have a taiva, and that taiva somehow clouds my objective understanding of reality, and I get very taken by the subjective desire and lose sight of objective truth. That's what the Rebbe is describing. Right? And what can happen in that moment? It's called rationalization. I will rationalize the behavior. It's really okay. Right? Now, in a moment of clarity, I won't say that. If someone were to walk up to me and ask me the question, is this behavior okay? I'd say no. But when it's my own taiva, I might say yes. Well, because I'll figure out why it's really okay. It might take more work, it might take not so much work. The more that taiva is something that has become part of my regular everyday life, so then it's going to be relatively easy for that taiva to cloud my objective reality. If it's not so, something unusual, so it might be easier not to let it overcome me. It causes a lack of sensitivity to godliness. And the beauty of mitzvahs, the elevated state of mitzvahs. And the lowliness of being far from such a beautiful state, like that marshal we said yesterday, sitting on the Eibishter's lap, and he says, don't go there, stay here with me. The negative commandment, don't go there. That's not for you. That place is not for you. Stay here with me. Stay next to me. So that we can do Basim. That can also be Basim. Okay, that's Ois Gimel. Ruach Shtus. Now I want to get you to Ois Daled before we stop, because Ois Daled talks about a more uplifting aspect of the same basic equation. Not that Ois Gimel isn't true, and we have to encounter it and not run away from it. But there's an Ois Daled also, Baruch Hashem. Amnam. However, that which the night is going to just 2 lines of reviewing what we just read, what we just learned. That which the animal soul, can cover up the godly soul. Vahainu, and that's the ruach shtus, the spirit of folly that we just talked about. Shemechasa umaylim, that it covers and conceals alor emes, the light of truth. Vagilui, and revelation. And simply, what is that? Dos vos welt is mailim of elokus, that the world can conceal godliness, and I can get taken by worldly reality as opposed to realizing that worldly reality is just a kli to reveal godly reality. Oh, so now the Rebbe says something very important. Hurak al hamidais the nefesh elokis. What aspect is it of your godly soul that can be affected by your animal soul? That aspect that's called midas, the emotional attributes of your nefesh elokis. Let's read a couple more words and then we'll talk about it. Aval lo yala atzmus, the nefesh elokis. Not on the essence of the nefesh elokis. The Rebbe is about to bring a mashal. The mashal of the soul as a rope, which is a mashal brought in Psukim. Yaakov chevel nachlasei. A rope is his inheritance. What's a rope? A rope connects a high point to a low point. The rope hangs from the ceiling to the floor. It connects the floor to the ceiling. You want to connect to the ceiling, you up the rope. Okay. We all learned how to climb a rope in gym class. Okay. So the Rebbe is about to explain as follows. If this is the rope is connected up here, and that's an essential connection that can never be affected negatively or positively by anything we do in this world, because it's an essential connection. Right? If your DNA says you have black hair, you can dye it blonde for 60 years. That doesn't change your DNA. You can also dye it black for 60 years. Doesn't make it more black, the DNA. It doesn't affect the DNA in any way, shape, or form. It is what it is. Right? Okay, so the essential connection of you to the Eibishter is the level of the essence of your soul, which is mushrash, which is rooted in the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what's happening up here. If chas v'shalom, we do something that was just described rather vividly by us in Ois Gimel, if we involve ourselves in activity that's concealing godliness, that's a lack of our, for an expression of our lack of sensitivity, what are we doing? We're cutting the rope. But we're cutting the rope from itself. We're not cutting the rope from its source. We'll see what the Rebbe is about to say. So everything we said in the previous chapter about the ability of the nefesh elokis to cover up the nefesh bahamis, to cover up the nefesh elokis, the animal soul to cover up the godly soul, all of that is only relative to the aspects of the animal soul, the godly soul, the aspects of the godly soul that are clothed in the body and are part of vitalizing your body down here in Elam Hazak. But the essence of your soul is not affected negatively. The Rebbe will explain that at great length. That's what we're about to see. Which means no matter how far a Jew might stray, they're still essentially connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which means they can always come back. Right? Avaloy ala atzmus, the essence of the nefesh elokis. Dehine ksiv, Yaakov chevel nachlasei. Pasuk in Devarim. Moshe Rabbeinu says, Yaakov, a rope is his inheritance. The iskashrus and the shama belokus, the connection of the soul to God, who chevel is like a, now this is obviously a mashal, a parable, right? It's like a rope. Hashazur mitaryag nimin, that is braided of 613 strands, the rope. Ta'chevel hu neshama atzma. The chevel, the rope, is the neshama itself. It's not that the neshama is connected to the Eibishter by virtue of the rope. The neshama is the rope. And the neshama has 613 strands. What does that mean? A certain aspect of the neshama that is naturally connected to a certain aspect of God's will, the 613 mitzvahs. Expressing a certain aspect of the personality of the soul. Every mitzvah allows the neshama to express a certain aspect of its own personality, of what it's really all about. So there'll be expressions in a negative way of not doing something, which is a certain expression of an aspect of the soul, and an expression in a positive way of doing something, which will also express a certain aspect of the soul. Because the soul and God's will are one. God's will is expressed as 613 different expressions, 613 mitzvahs min Torah. So to the soul has 613 different aspects, different vehicles of connection. Ta'chevel hu neshama atzma. The nishmaso shel adam, the neshama of a person, who a chevel is the rope, hamakashrei belakus, that connects him to God. Another mashal for the neshama is like a ray of light, which will come up later. But then now the Rebbe is talking about the mashal, a rope from the ceiling to the floor. Connects the ceiling to the floor, and the floor to the ceiling. Ula zois and neshama atzma, and for this reason, the neshama itself is shazura, is braided, mitar yagnimin, from 613 strands. Kedi isa b'sefer shel beinoni in Perek Nun Aleph, as it says in Sefer shel beinoni, also called Tanya, in the 51st chapter. The neshama klula, the neshama includes, incorporates mitaryag keiches, 613 different powers, 613 different aspects of the soul, each of those aspects expressed in a particular mitzvah. Amazing. Which means mitzvahs are completely and totally natural for the soul. It's not an imposition of something foreign. It's just an expression of the nature of the nature of the neshama. Which is why when a Jew does a mitzvah, they are often very powerfully touched by that, because it's touching something very, very deep in them in terms of their natural connection to that behavior. It's part of them. It just might be covered up, right? Because Elamazah can cover things like that up. I remember that mashal we learned once, the Friedrich Rebbe. When Friedrich Rebbe came to America, so he sent some Chassidim to travel around and see what's going on. Try to bring some Jews back to Yiddishkeit. America was a wasteland, right? Jews in Europe, I don't know, some people know this, some people don't know this, it's important to know. The Jews in Europe, people often wonder why the Jews in Europe didn't all leave when things started looking bad. First of all, not everybody could, but some could, and they still chose not to. Why? Well, what was on the other side of the pond? The Treifa Medina, that's what it was called, right, by the Yidden in Europe. The Treifa Medina. Why? What was treif? What was so not kosher? Well, they heard what was going on over there. What was happening to the Jews who went to America? Stopped keeping Shabbos, stopped eating kosher food. They said, we'd rather die here in Europe keeping Shabbos than die over there not keeping Shabbos. Right? I mean, physical death, spiritual death. Meaning, and a lot of it had to do with, do I want to take my children there? Right? Am I going to bring my children in a place where now, Baruch Hashem, there's a lot of Yiddishkeit in America, but it's also true that North America, the Western world, has taken its toll on the Jewish world rather seriously. Right? Okay. So, right, wrong, that's not the issue. Okay. So, they didn't want to leave. Because they realized that they wanted to stay close to the Eibishter as much as they could where they were. And the natural state of that of every single one of us is that connection. Why? Well, because that's our neshama. And if I'm sensitive to that, I feel that. And a Jew who even a Jew might not be sensitive to it, when they do a mitzvah, they feel, very often they feel connected to what's going on. Sometimes not, but they often do. Right? The neshama klula mitaya keches. V'tama davar, the reason of all this, the understanding of all this, hu da'amar Razal. Chazal say in a Mishnah in Sanhedrin, 4th chapter, Mishnah Hay, Chayev Adam Leimar, a person's obligated to say, and this is a famous statement that you've all heard, Bishvili Nivra Elam, the world was created for my sake. Now that doesn't mean that Chazal is telling that everybody should be an insufferable egotist, that he thinks that the whole world is about him. What does that mean? Obviously it means something deep and sophisticated. So what does it mean? We'll see this and then we'll stop. The Oilam hu miloshen Helam. World, the word world comes from the language of concealment. What does the world conceal? Well, by virtue of the fact that you're aware of the existence of the world, to that extent, you're not necessarily aware of the existence of the source of the world, because you're very powerfully aware of the world itself. And it's not revealing its source. Matter of fact, it's hiding its source. Does it have a source? Of course it has a source. Everything has a source. But it's not revealing its source. It's concealing its source, such that, and this is what we learned in the Rebbe's first Maamer, 2 weeks ago, right, when we saw the Rebbe's explanation of the first chapter in Basi L'Gani. The oilam hu miloshen Helam. The kol echad ve'echad chayev loimer, every single person is obligated to say that the world was created for me. What does that mean? The helim, the concealment, the tzimtzum arishan, the constriction of God's light, nivra bishvili, was created for me. What does that mean? Ubichdei levaradoi lezachachai. Why did the Eibusher create a reality of concealment? So that I can rectify it and purify. The Eibusher allows us to be his partners in the creation of the world. The Eibusher wants a certain world, and he gives us the opportunity to be his partner in the creation of that world. What's that world? The world of godly revelation, because that's really what he wants. When a Kadosh Baruch Hu looks at this world, what does he see? Hiddenness or revelation? Revelation. He's not fooled by the world, right? So in terms of dir b'tachteinim, a dwelling place in the lower realms, and the Rebbe says this explicitly in certain places, Rosh Hashanah Tafshin Lamed Gimel, you can see it, it's clear as a bell. The Rebbe says that the dir b'tachteinim came into existence the moment God created the world. What is the world in essence? A dwelling place for God in the lower realms. That's what it is. But what's the problem? That's not revealed to you and I. It's revealed to God. God's not fooled by the world. You and I might be. So what's our job? Is to overcome that concealment and reveal what's really there. So we have to open up our eyes and see reality the proper way. So the first eyes we open are our intellectual eyes. So at least we're aware of what the world is, and hopefully that'll bring about a situation where even our physical eyes, when we look around in the world, we'll see Elokus. Right? You'll see Hashgacha Pratis, you'll see divine providence in everything that happens to you. Right? Realize that everything that happens to you is this verbringen you're having with the Kadosh Baruch Hu at every moment of your life. He might be pushing your buttons and challenging you, or he might be giving you something so incredible and so amazing that, when he's pushing your buttons, so hopefully you can deal with it joyfully and without getting angry, because he realizes it's him challenging you, and that the ikar challenge is not to deal with it with anger, but to deal with it with simcha, and because if you see him in it, then you'll be able to deal with it with simcha, as much as it's an uncomfortable or unenjoyable situation to say that, but okay, this is evidently what he wants me to deal with right now, or something so good, and they thank him for that, because that's life in Olam Hazeh. And so the concealment was created for me. The world was created for me. What does Chazal mean? The concealment was created for me. And what for? So that you and I can see the godliness in the dark. We learn how to play golf in the dark like that guy. He has a name, right? Izzy found his name. I forget it. But Izzy found him. No, who found it? Kalman, you found him. Who found him? Someone found him. Right? Someone found him. Found his name, Clemens or something. They looked him up, and it told the whole story, $1,000, and Ben Hogan. The whole story was. I mean, if it was on the internet, then for sure it's true, right? The whole story was there, right? Okay. So what's the game? The game is to learn how to play in the dark, to see God in the dark. And who are we? Well, we're created in such a way that we have all that is necessary to do that. And the Rebbe is going to, we'll see that, what's the date? We'll see that tomorrow. That our physical reality is 248 limbs and 365 muscles, sinews, whatever, which correspond to the 613 mitzvahs. And our neshama has 613 different keiches. So both our body and our soul are completely and totally in line with the purpose of creation, which is to reveal godliness, which is expressed in this world through the 613 mitzvahs. But in general, real godliness in the world. Okay. Hi, Shmuel. Okay. We made it through